mi abe we bakers. Leke mi fondo, mi fonyo dea. Eleia. Enyo. So today I'm here with someone known here in Rwanda. Madame Chara
Itoka.
So I'm with Chara. Chara is doing many things here in Rwanda. So she's originally from Liberia. She has many things to tell us about the country, and she lived in the US for many years, and she decided to come back on the continent. So for those who don't know this YouTube channel, Way Back to Africa is a channel aims to help Africans and African descendants from abroad to come back on the motherland. So if you are interested in this topic, you are on the right channel. Initially, the videos are in French, but today, exceptionally, we are doing in English because you have someone very, 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 very interesting, and she's going to tell us a lot about her story, why she decided to come back, what she's doing here in Rwanda, and also she will talk about why she thinks that it's important for Africans and African descent to come back on the motherland. Now that it is said, can we start this video, Madame Chara?
Yes, let's begin.
Let's begin. So, Chara, can you introduce yourself?
All right. Dive right in. Chara Itoka. Many ways to pronounce my last name, but that's the one I'm going with today. I've been in Rwanda for 8 years now. So this is my other home, I would say. My original home is Liberia in West Africa. And I have a consulting business here.
Oh, sorry, I'm going to stop you.
Yes.
You said that Liberia is the original, but
yes.
You don't have Togolese roots?
I am Togolese, now that you reminded me, no. So my great-grandparents on my father's side are Togolese, yes. So I'm also Togolese, and my mother is half Sierra Leonean, so I'm also Sierra Leonean.
Okay.
So I'm very ECOWAS, you can call me ECOWAS.
Yeah, okay. You are very like Western African girl.
Roots.
Yeah,
I was born in Liberia, so if you ask me, I would say I'm Liberian first.
Okay.
Okay.
So, but okay, you were born in Liberia?
Yes.
When did you decide to move to the US? Is it when you started for the uni? It was like maybe for other reason? You know that I made a video on my channel about how the African Americans did not succeed their return in the continent. Maybe you can tell us more about also this African American diaspora in Liberia. Are you also one of them?
I am
so
not.
You can. You are not. Okay, you can tell us more about.
I'll give you a little bit of the history.
Yeah.
Yes. So to answer your first question, I did not move to the U.S. Out of my own choice. I was 5 years old, and my father was a master's student in Boston, and so we all went together, my entire family. Liberia has really interesting history because it was founded by descendants of freed slaves from the U.S. who settled in Liberia. And there are other groups that were there when they landed. And that caused some conflict, but that was in the early 1800s. Liberia was founded in 1847. And I am of a couple different ethnic groups in Liberia. I'm Vai, and I'm also Kru.
Okay. So maybe, yes, if you can tell us more about, I don't know, maybe we were too young to see that. So at this time, how it was between African Americans or African Americans descent and like, we can say like autochthon in English, we can also say that? Like people who are living originally here, like the Vai,
indigenous groups.
So it was fine, they were living all together. It was kind of complicated, and you know that there's like this war thing also. So
I'll tell you a little bit.
Yeah.
So by the time that I was born in 1981, indigenous people and Americo-Liberians, so those are the descendants from freed slaves, there was generally peace between the groups.
Yeah.
Of course, I would say that since the early 1800s, descendants of freed slaves from the US dominated for over 100 years. Dominated leadership positions, dominated, I would say, the economy, and other groups had to navigate their way. So there was tension and there was conflict. But the 14-year civil war that started in 1989, did not happen like solely, like that wasn't the root of all of it, but there's definitely bits and pieces there, for sure.
I get it.
So, but from my experience, our 15, 16 tribes in Liberia, plus Americo-Liberians, we generally get along quite well and mix. And people marry each other and mix.
Yeah, I get it. So sorry, we are going to get back now on the time you went to the US. You were
Yes, I was 5 years old. So yeah, I started school, first grade in the US, and then...
Where in the US?
I was in Cambridge, Massachusetts.
Yeah?
I was in Massachusetts. So my father, he studied there for 2 years, and after he did, he went back to Liberia because he worked for the Liberian government, and they're the ones that gave him the scholarship. So he went back home, and my mother and my 2 sisters, myself, and then in 1989, the war broke out. So I got stuck. So by default.
Like first of all, you left when you were 5 years old. You stayed 2 years for your father to graduate.
Yes.
He came back to the continent in Liberia.
Yes.
And after like what it was
another
maybe,
year went by.
Maybe like 10 years after, like 10,
No.
10 years after that you came back. Or?
So I first went in 1986, and then the war broke out in 1989.
Okay.
So he studied for 2 years, and then another year passes, and Christmas Eve 1989, the war broke out. So I couldn't go back home. So I grew up in the States. I actually grew up there because I couldn't go back home to my country.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but my father was in Liberia.
So, but seeing that and like the war, all this crazy thing happening, because in the 90s in Africa it was crazy, like war in Liberia,
Sierra
in
Leone,
also,
yes.
also in Eastern Africa, like here in Rwanda.
Absolutely.
What happened in Rwanda, the genocide, what happened in Rwanda, you also like in Somalia, Ethiopia,
Yes.
Ivory Coast, so like, it was the war like in many countries, also in Congo. So seeing all of that,
Yes.
you were still willing to come back to the continent?
I always wanted to come back home. The war didn't throw me off because I understood that it would one time end. And when it ended, people would have to come back to contribute to the recovery of these countries. So I saw myself as one of those people. So the conflict didn't scare me away. Of course I went back after the election of the first democratically elected female president in Africa, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. So I went back after the conflict ended, but I knew that I was going to ultimately go back and I wanted to work in Africa. So I went to Liberia when I was 26. So 21 years after I left.
Yeah. So you came back when you were 26?
Yes.
In a country who has gone through a lot?
Yes.
Okay. I think you might not recognize it when you were there
different.
initially. Yeah, it looks different.
Yeah.
You had still some siblings, some family there. So when
Lots
you
of
came back,
family.
did you feel at home, or you were like, oh, I always thought that when I was going to come back, it's going to be my home, but I feel like a foreigner, or what was your initial feeling?
I definitely romanticized it a lot, thinking, oh, I would go back to Liberia, I would fit right in, I would meet my people, my family, everyone would embrace me. But of course, people have been through a lot. And I left when I was so young, so I had flashes of memories, but neighborhoods looked different. So when I went back home, I had to kind of put myself into the reality of post-conflict Liberia.
Okay.
I had a great experience though, and I think a big part of that is because my mother went with me. And the second important piece, I didn't just go like that. I was part of a fellowship program. So I went to contribute and to work for the Liberian government. So having that support system already there wasn't like I went just by myself.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, okay, you came back to the continent, you came back to your country.
Yes.
Liberia, so you were working for the government for Ellen Johnson, the first elected female in Africa. So
Yes.
how was it at this time? What were you doing? Did you like it? Was it like a lot of success? And why you decided to move from Liberia to Rwanda? Is it at the same time, or maybe you left again for the US? Or tell us more about your story.
The journey?
Yeah.
Yes. So working for President Johnson Sirleaf's government was wonderful. It was an exciting time. It was a time where we had the resources put towards building the capacity of the country. And I was really happy to be a part of that. I was working for the Liberia Refugee Repatriation and Resettlement Commission, LRRC. So it was all about having people come back home from the region.
You were doing like, we're back to Africa this time.
Basically, that's what I was doing for former refugees coming back home. So it's all about repatriation, all about reintegration into the different sectors. It was wonderful. I had a wonderful boss. So we were all special assistants at the time. And eventually, from that commission, I also went to work for the Ministry of Planning. And I was at the assistant minister level at that point, working on managing portfolios, like the US portfolio from Liberia's perspective, People's Republic of China portfolio from representing the government of Liberia. So it was really interesting.
Yeah.
It was interesting. I could draw from all of my different educational experiences and really focus on moving Liberia forward. I loved it. I loved it. I was there for 6 years. By the time that I left, I was a deputy minister. I was the youngest political appointee at the time.
Congratulations.
And thank you. And I went back to work with the LRRC, so that Refugee Commission. And it was like a full circle experience. I highly recommend people coming back home not just, I was in my 20s then, but even now, coming back home and finding something to do that gives you energy, like re-energizes you, that you're really passionate about, I think that will help you navigate all of the different challenges that come with being in a post-conflict setting for a lot of our countries, or that come with the fact that resources are different. Electricity may not be as stable. Water, cleanliness, security, all of that. So you really have to be passionate because that's what carries you through. And find community.
So that's what happened, but I was going to say you only stay 6 years. It's not only 6 years, but what made you leave the country if everything was going well? So you work on many things, you had a lot of energy to work on this topic. So what pushed you out of the country?
So I wouldn't say anything pushed me out. Life happened. I got married, I had a baby, and so I found myself in the US. I had just had a baby, and
so you came back in the US and it was on purpose, or it just...
I went to deliver him in the US. So I was there for supposedly a short time, and then Ebola broke out in 2014 in Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone. So I didn't go back. I didn't go back to Liberia at that time. It wasn't a good move for me at the time.
But initially it was the plan, coming back on the continent, right?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So then I found myself in the US for 5 years. So that was different. I think about the adjustment and just that whole process of being back home, getting used to it. Then all of a sudden I found myself back in the US again and I had to adjust again. But for me, acculturation is really important. I really love to pick and choose like some pieces from my US experience, my immigrant experience, from my Liberian culture. And then I found myself in Rwanda.
How come? It was like, how come did you know about this country? And also I think you were in the US, so the country has also gone through a lot. So, so how did you find out about Rwanda?
So I've always known about Rwanda. I think mostly, not necessarily because of the communities I was in growing up. I didn't know any Rwandese growing up in Boston. But when I moved back to Liberia in 2007, there was a huge UN mission, and there were Rwandans there. There were Burundians, and I started to connect with them and other East Africans. So I got to know a bit about Rwanda. I would say I pulled from what I knew when I was in secondary school, when the genocide against the Tutsi happened, and we're studying it, we were learning about it, we were watching the situation, and just meeting Rwandese just opened my eyes. So imagine 10 years later, I come here for the first time. It was August 2017. I was running an NGO out of Boston, which brought me here, and I loved it. So different, so different from West Africa. I think you can attest to this. And I felt good. I felt comfortable.
Did you feel at home? Like it was...
I did. It's not the same way I feel at home in Ghana or Togo or other West African countries or Senegal, places I've spent a lot of time. I felt at home because so much just resonates with me.
Yeah.
You know, our cultures are very different,
Yeah.
but it felt right. I felt like I could acclimate, and I made it my home. I wanted to also move back to the continent, so let's get to that.
Yeah.
I had an almost 5-year-old at the time.
Yeah.
It was a time where the U.S. was shifting, leadership had just shifted, and I thought, you know, I think it would be safer
Yeah.
to raise my son on the African continent. And I really,
For a black man or what?
yes. So a big part of it is raising a black boy in the U.S. Dangerous, literally.
Why?
Black women are targeted as well.
Yeah.
You know, it's the institutionalized racism that we face in the U.S. Oftentimes, whenever I talk to people, even relatives or friends who have always been on the continent, they're like, but the U.S. is so great. Everything is phenomenal. Like, don't you prefer it? And I'm like, no. Because my experience, I have to be honest, my experience as an immigrant growing up in the U.S. was not all roses. I faced racism.
Yeah.
I experienced all that. But then over time, black boys, they were targeted. Police can shoot people. We've seen it on site, even now. So I wanted my son to have his roots and the foundation on the continent because I didn't get to have that. Because yes, of course, I was there till I was 5, but then I always had that feeling like, well, as I was dealing with challenges in the U.S., that I could be back home. You know, I have a home country.
Yeah.
You know, and I know my ethnicities, I know my tribes, I know my villages.
Yeah.
So why am I in the U.S. when I could actually be with my people?
Yeah.
Now, we know it's not perfect all the time, and there are things that I did enjoy and I appreciate about the U.S., but I wanted my son to be rooted in the fact that he's African.
Yeah.
And I can say that he's lived most of his life in Rwanda,
Yeah.
and he feels so confident. Even when we visit the U.S., he has no complex about being black or being African. No one can tease him about anything because he's like, no, I know who I am, and I'm proud.
You know his roots.
Yeah,
So,
he knows his roots.
Yeah. So okay, you were running an NGO when you came here.
I first came here.
Yeah, you came and you found the opportunity. You're like, okay, I'm going to raise my son here. It's a very good opportunity, and now after a few years, now it has been like almost 9 years. Then
over 8.
This year. So you think like you are happy about your choice. You don't regret.
Oh, yes. No regrets, huh? I definitely made the right choice, and
So it was the best choice of your life.
I wouldn't say it's the best choice of my life, but it's been a good choice.
Yeah.
And the reason, like a really obvious way of knowing that is seeing my son and seeing how well he's done. And also seeing how I've been able to live here, been able to work, I've been able to make money, pay taxes, you know, have friends, have a community. That's how you know that you're successful. It's not just the money, it's your whole experience.
Yeah, I get it.
It's been good.
So that's something I would like to dig in about you were able to work here.
Yes.
Initially you are from the US, so I think you have the
I have 2 passports.
You have 2 passports.
I do.
But the one helping you to work here, you think that it's better to have the US citizenship to work here? Because now I think after a few years they gave you like the work permit. So how it works, if someone would like to do like you would like to come to Rwanda, maybe open a business or an NGO or whatever. And so what was your experience about that? How long it was easy for you to settle here? How did you?
It was quite easy to open up a business here. I must be, you know, to tell you the truth, it really was. And I remember when I first got here, so before we moved, I left the organization. I knew I was coming and I was going to start my own consulting business.
Yeah.
So I talked to one of my clients. I had a client before I came. I highly recommend that. Setting something up so that you don't just come and like search.
Yeah.
I already had a client that paid for our flights.
How did you find this client, and why it was like, okay, I'm going to hire this lady, I don't know her? Was it a recommendation, or how did you find this client?
So interestingly, it was a cold email. I sent a cold email to a client that I saw actually online. Okay. I saw them speaking at a conference, and I was like, oh, I have something of value that I can add here.
Okay.
And so I pitched to them that I would do an assessment of their women's sewing program that they had at that time, 10 years, but they'd never assessed the impact of this program.
Yeah, I get it.
So after sending the cold email, someone actually got back to me. We had calls, set it up, negotiated so that myself, my son would move. Our flights were covered. We had housing for 3 months, that kind of negotiation to get me settled in, to get us settled in.
Okay.
So that's how I actually came. Of course, it's not a country I had never been. I'd been a few times before, and my son had been one time before. But yeah, I think that really helped, having that relationship beforehand.
Okay.
Now, the second piece, I was advised actually by this client that instead of starting my business, I was going to start with my Liberian passport because that makes sense to me. He said, you know what? I think it would be smarter if you focus on your U.S. passport just because you don't have an embassy here.
Yeah.
And if anything happens, you want to have that support.
Yeah, it's at
which
least,
is smart, right?
Yeah, it's
You're so
right
much taller
choice.
than me right now.
Yeah.
And so that's how it went. I went to RDB. I set up, I registered my business. It didn't take long. It took, I think at the time, it took 3 days max. And then I could start operations. Yeah, I could start taking clients in, and that was 8 years ago.
Okay.
So the process was pretty smooth. I think they have a one-stop shop.
Every time you had to renew your, let's say, your visa.
So yeah, like every 3 years, I would renew my permit. So I have an entrepreneur permit.
Okay. So they give you 3 years, and you have to renew every 3 years, right?
Yeah, it's 3 or 2 years.
And some people, they are saying that after 8 years, so I think that's a year. After 8 years, you can have the Rwandan nationality.
Oh, I'm on for the naturalization next step because I don't really see. I think that makes sense to naturalize.
So you really feel at home. So that's
I feel at home.
Yeah.
I feel good. I feel like I have invested in the country. I'm going to continue to make bigger investments.
Yeah.
And yeah, Rwanda is definitely one of my homes.
Yeah, you came for this consultancy. You came for
Yes.
this NGO initially, but now, what are you doing exactly? What is your main activity? You are saying that you are invested in the country. So you have your company?
Yes.
You are still in consultancy, or what are you doing?
I do take on different clients. So over the span of 8 years, I've done different things. One thing about me is I'm definitely a generalist, I would say.
Yeah.
The biggest part of my work experience has been in development, working in the public sector, as I explained before. I've worked in different kind of international bodies. I've worked at human rights organizations, worked as a funder, all of that. So I basically draw from all of my past experiences. And in Rwanda, as I mentioned, the assessment, I do a lot of impact assessments. I do a lot of research. I always have clients in Rwanda. I don't focus so much on too many international clients, though I do have that.
Yeah.
My portfolio is pretty balanced, leaning more towards Rwanda. But yes, so I will do research for papers. I write strategies. I create like a 5-year strategic plan. I also work in fashion, so I kind of mix it up.
Okay, you touch many things.
Yes.
And what do you feel? Because some people are saying that, for example, in Rwanda or in other African countries, there is no money. We cannot make money in these countries.
Yeah.
What would be your
My perspective.
on this topic?
My
Tell
international,
the truth. People want to know.
yeah, no, I always, my international clients pay at a higher rate.
Yeah.
They do.
Yeah.
But I will say that my local clients are so important because you always want to get to this point where you're not pitching to people, people are coming to you.
Yeah.
So you have to have relationships in the country. You have to, I've taken some clients on that maybe didn't pay me as much as somebody in New York would pay me, but I would take it because there's that financial capital, but then there's other kinds of capital, right?
Yeah,
There's the
like,
social capital.
Yeah, I get it.
There's building inroads here in Rwanda. So now I'm at a point where people come to me and they're like, "Oh, I've heard of you, Chara. I've heard about the work that you do, and I'd love to work with you." So that's really important. You cannot sit here, or you cannot sit in the continent and just work as a remote worker. I don't really recommend that. I do remote work, but my work and my relationships here are what carry us through, and they're what makes this our home. And I actually feel like if I did my own assessment of my portfolio over the past 8 years here, I would say the greatest impact has been my Rwandan clients.
Yeah. So it's you went back to the continent. You wanted to have some impact, positive impact, and that's what you found here, and that's what you are doing here.
Yes. So it's more than the money. But of course, I'll give another practical advice. If you're not making as much as you would in Europe or or US, I would say take 3. Take 3. I wouldn't recommend more. Take 3 of the smaller clients. Find a way to balance your schedule so that you can make it work. Say you don't have an international partner. have some local client work,
Yeah.
but take three.
Three what? Three local?
Three different projects.
Okay.
Yeah, so that you have to have a number in mind. How much money do you need to actually live well?
Yeah.
Not just live.
So-
you don't want to be here and struggle.
In
You
your
wanna live
opinion,
well.
give us some numbers, some figures. In your opinion, how much you should earn, for example, when you are coming from the US to live well in Rwanda? In your opinion.
In my opinion. Everything is in my opinion. Well, it depends on where you're coming from in the US.
Yeah.
Okay? But I will say from a place like Boston, which is already very expensive.
Very expensive, yeah.
Coming to Rwanda, which is Kigali is an expensive city on the continent. I would say for an individual, so for me it's different because I have a son, so I pay school fees. I have a lot of responsibilities.
Yeah, but you can also give some,
I'll give
details.
both. I'll give both.
Yeah.
I would say for an individual, say you're a single person, not married, no children, a month, let's just say it can't be less than $3,500 a month.
Okay, yeah.
Okay? Of course, it depends where you live,
Yeah,
like
but-
your rent, but I would give nice little baseline at
so that you don't have to
$3,500.
check your account, you don't have
You're
to...
not like
you're not stressed.
starving.
Yeah.
You're not worried because you most likely have some responsibilities still in the U.S. because
Yeah.
I know I do.
Yeah.
So in order
Some
to cover
financial
those,
liabilities or...
yes, you have like or other investments, or you
yeah.
want to save for the future to get married, to
Yeah.
purchase something. I would say $3,500 a month. Now for a family, if you have one child,
Yeah.
it depends on the lifestyle you want to live,
Yeah.
how many times you want to go out to eat, all of that. But I definitely wouldn't go below 5,000,
Yeah.
5,000 to 8,000, because school fees, clothes.
The school fees are
Food.
very expensive, or like for example, you can give
Once again, it depends on what kind
which
of
school.
school.
But if, for example, you are going like with, I don't know if there's an
International
American
school?
Yeah, international school.
My son goes to an American school.
Yeah.
It's called, my son goes to an American school, and I would say, you want to know how much the school fees are, or how much you would need in order to cover that and everything else?
You can give both so that people
Yeah.
can have an idea, because if they are like in the US and they would like maybe to settle back in the continent, and they're like, okay, if I have one son or maybe two sons or maybe, let's
Yeah.
say three children, how much it would cost me to bring my kids in this school, because they at least you have like the same, let's say, cursus as in the US, so if
Similar
you want,
standards.
yes, exactly. So how
Well,
much does it cost?
For a year, international schools
Yeah.
here can be like 16,000 US.
16,000.
Yeah, and
okay,
it depends on where
Yeah.
they are in the school system.
Yeah.
It's cheaper when they're younger, as my son's in 8th grade. So it can be that much, but it's broken down,
Yeah.
right? So you could put 1,000 towards school fees every month if you decide to go to one of the more expensive schools.
Yeah.
But you can also send your child to a run-in private school.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are other options.
Yeah, and they are like, let's say, less expensive.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So
Absolutely.
that's up to you and the choice you are making for
Absolutely.
your
In your
children.
child, like what works best for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, where they fit in.
Okay. Great. So
Yeah.
you told us about like the administrative part of coming here, like
Yes.
with the children.
Yes.
You are talking also about the social life. You're saying that you are making a community. Did you find a community
Absolutely.
here? You are mainly with the Rwandans, international Rwandans, or maybe with the US citizen. So how is your social life? And that's something that people they might not know watching us, but Chara is very known here. Everyone
Oh, please.
knows about her. So
I think Masa is flattering me here, but I'm an extrovert. So when you're an extrovert, you need to connect with people. I get my energy from connecting with people, which is different because in Rwanda, I would say most people are introverted, but most of my friends are Rwandese, actually,
Yeah.
interestingly. And that's a mix of people who were always home or people who are in the diaspora.
Yeah.
And then I would say the next group would be other Africans.
Yeah.
Like West African friends. That's where I also find my community, because you always need to talk to your people.
Yeah.
You also need to, connect in a way that you're very familiar with. And then I would say I don't hang out with many Americans, but if
Okay.
I do, they'd be Black Americans.
okay, yeah, I get it.
Who
I
have
get it.
come
So-
back to the continent.
Yeah. So you have like always this print. That's your footprint.
Yes.
Like people coming back to the continent. Africans, you are very African-centered.
Yes.
So which is
Yeah.
a
Balance.
that's a choice, and you feel home? You feel well
I
here?
feel good. I feel good. It's something you must cultivate, though.
Yeah, yeah.
It isn't something that you move home and it's like, these are my friends, that's it.
Yeah, yeah,
no, people come, they go.
Yeah.
Relationships change, they
Yeah.
evolve. So it's something that you have to work on.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You said many things, but Chara, so now you are telling us that life is perfect in Rwanda. There's
Life
nothing
is
that.
not perfect.
So if there's like some improvement or things that maybe you still have some, it's still hard for you to accommodate in Rwanda, what it would be, for example?
Okay, so this is something that I don't think will change tomorrow, anytime soon. But when you're coming from West Africa or other places where people are very direct
Yeah.
and things move faster,
Yeah, and,
that is something I'm still getting used to. In Rwanda, people are more passive aggressive. People are not as assertive.
Straightforward.
They're not as straightforward. And so that's something that impacts all my relationships, friendships, dating relationships, work relationships. I'm not as used to it. And it's been 8 years and it's still kind of is something I must adjust to. Yeah. And I don't think it's going to change tomorrow. I think it's cultural in many ways, but yeah, it's something that I deal with. And it doesn't stop me from enjoying life here. So it's not perfect, but you find ways to make it work for you.
Yeah. Okay, great. So I think you told us many things and about the social life. I think there's something that comes sometimes in the section or even in the community. People are talking about the dating life in Africa in general or in Rwanda. So you gave like some few words.
Little hints.
Maybe we are going to do another video talking about that.
We can. There's a lot to say.
So yes, maybe we are going to do so. I think we finished the interview. We are almost at the end of the interview. So I would like to thank you a lot, Chara, for your time. And maybe if you had like one final word, one final idea for people who are watching us, who took the time to watch your interview today.
Wow. My final word would be that when you think about coming home, think about the long term. Don't think about everything that will happen immediately. And because things take time and things move slower on the continent. So you have to be patient and you will meet all kinds of personalities. There's no reason for you to like throw away your entire experience because you get frustrated. They're frustrating people all over the world. Don't put even extra pressure on us as Africans because we don't fit into your idea of how it should be going home. Even for us Africans in the diaspora, we come home, we expect everyone to be a certain way. You need to be open-minded, you need to be patient, and you need to not take things so personally. Okay, thank you a lot, Chara, for your time, for this interview and with many insight, many advice. You know, in my YouTube channel, I always ask the people, my guests, how they say goodbye in their mother tongue. Okay, so you are saying that you are Vai. Oh my goodness.
You have also like Ewe roots. So do you know how we say goodbye in Vai?
My son speaks Vai better than me. I don't know how to. I can say hi.
But not goodbye.
I don't know how to say bye.
No problem.
Take my card. Take my Vi card from me, please. But you know what? Since we're both Ewe, give it to me. I'll repeat.
So I think for the Ewe people, because you know in Togo we speak mainly Mina, so which is very similar to Ewe, but sometimes there's some difference. They say Eiso, so it means like
Eiso.
Like see you tomorrow.
Eiso.
But now in Mina, you know, and in this YouTube channel, I like to say it this way, and you know it is Eizade.
Eizade. I tried.
Yeah, you did your best. Congratulations.